Hospitals are meant to be places of healing, of safety. But when the sun goes down and the midnight hour approaches, that sense of security can crumble into something else entirely. The silence becomes heavy. The long, sterile hallways seem to twist and stretch, the dim lights flickering like a weak pulse. This is a story about St. Mary's Hospital and a young nurse who learned that some places never let go of their secrets. Her name was Emily. She was new, full of energy, and eager to prove herself on the challenging night shift. But soon, the exhaustion started playing tricks on her mind. Or so she thought. She'd hear faint whispers from rooms she knew were empty. She'd walk through sudden, inexplicable cold spots that vanished as quickly as they appeared. And in the corner of her eye, she'd see shadows that danced and shifted, refusing to match any source of light. She told herself it was just fatigue, the way the mind rebels against the unnatural quiet of a sleeping hospital. She was wrong. The breaking point was room 9. It was located at the very end of a long, unused corridor in the old East Wing, a place the seasoned nurses seemed to deliberately avoid. When Emily, out of curiosity, asked them why, the answers were always vague, unsettling. "It's just better not to disturb room 9, they'd say, their eyes darting away. It was a silent, shared understanding she wasn't yet a part of. Then came the night her shift assignment was unexpectedly changed. A single patient, she was told, needed a checkup in that very room. A chill ran down her spine, but she was a professional. She took the chart and walked the long, lonely path down the East Wing corridor. The air grew colder with every step. The door to room 9 was old, heavy wood, and it creaked open with a low groan that echoed in the silence. Inside, the room was stark. A pale woman lay completely motionless in the single bed, her stillness almost unnatural. Emily glanced at the name tag on her wrist. It read, Lydia Harper. Trying to keep her voice steady and cheerful, Emily whispered, "Good evening, Ms. Harper. I'm Emily, your nurse for tonight." There was no response. The woman didn't move, didn't even blink. Her eyes were fixed on the ceiling, her lips slightly parted. The only sign of life was the slow, shallow rise and fall of her chest. Emily reached for the chart at the foot of the bed, hoping for more information. It was almost entirely blank. Just a few routine notes from years ago, and one new, faded entry scribbled at the bottom. It read, "Do not engage after midnight." Emily frowned. It had to be a prank, a strange initiation for the new nurse. She checked her watch. It was almost midnight. Shaking her head, she began her routine, checking the patient's vitals. Everything seemed stable, if a bit low. She stood by the bedside, watching the steady, rhythmic green line on the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Then, at exactly 12:03 a.m., it happened. The rhythmic beeping stopped, replaced by a single piercing, continuous tone. The green line went flat. Emily's own heart froze in her chest. A code blew. She was about to slam the emergency button, to scream for help. But before she could even move, the monitor flickered. The flat line vanished. The steady beeping returned, the green line tracing a normal, healthy heartbeat. It was only then, as relief washed over her, that Emily noticed something had changed. Lydia Harper's eyes were no longer staring at the ceiling. They were staring directly at her. The intensity of that gaze was terrifying. "Ms. Harper?" Emily whispered, her voice trembling. Lydia's lips moved, a slow, deliberate motion, but no sound came out. Instead, a soft, cold breath escaped, fogging the air between them for just a moment before dissipating. And just as quickly as it began, her gaze drifted back to the ceiling. The room was silent again, save for the steady beep of the monitor. The next morning, shaken, Emily sought out Dr. Shaw, the head physician. She recounted the entire bizarre incident, from the strange note on the chart to the monitor flatlining and the woman's chilling stare. Dr. Shaw listened, his brow furrowed in a deep frown. When she finished, he looked at her with a grave expression. "Emily," he said slowly, "there is no patient by that name in this hospital. There hasn't been for years." Emily tried to laugh it off, a nervous, hollow sound. That's impossible. I took her vitals. Her name was Lydia Harper. Dr. Shaw sighed, running a hand through his hair. Room 9 was sealed off a decade ago after a terrible fire. The woman who died in that room, her name was Lydia Harper. He looked at Emily, his eyes filled with a weary sadness. You're not the first nurse to say you've seen her. Emily's blood ran cold. The whispers, the cold spots, the shadows, they weren't just in her head. That night, driven by a mixture of terror and a desperate need for answers, she went back. She had to see for herself. The East Wing corridor was even darker than before, the air thick and frigid. She reached room 9 and pushed the door open slowly, her heart pounding against her ribs. The bed was empty. The sheets were perfectly made. The monitor was switched off, its screen black and dusty. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic, but underneath it, another scent lingered. Smoke. Suddenly, with a deafening crash, the door slammed shut behind her, plunging the room into near darkness. The single light bulb overhead began to flicker violently, strobing like a failing heart. In one terrifying flash of light, Emily saw her. A figure standing in the far corner of the room, a woman in a tattered, burned hospital gown, her dark hair hanging over her face, obscuring it. "Lydia?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. She took a step back, her hand fumbling behind her for the doorknob. The woman slowly lifted her head. One side of her face was horribly burned, the skin melted and scarred, her eyes lifeless and hollow. Her voice was a broken, raspy whisper that seemed to come from all around. "Why did you leave me?" Emily's mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. I don't understand. You said you'd stay." The voice was closer now. The heart monitor beside the empty bed suddenly burst to life, its screen glowing, beeping frantically at an impossible rate. The air grew thick, heavy with the suffocating scent of smoke and burning fabric. Emily turned and wrenched at the doorknob, but it wouldn't move. It was sealed shut. The sound of crackling flames filled her ears, growing louder and louder, though there was no fire to be seen. The room felt like an oven. Panic seized her as a cold breath brushed against her ear, and a final whisper slithered into her mind. "Bed 9. Never leaves." Just as she thought she would pass out, the door burst open. Emily stumbled backward out into the corridor, gasping for air. She turned back. The light in room 9 was steady. The door stood wide open, and the room was completely, utterly empty, as if nothing had ever happened. Emily quit her job at St. Mary's a few days later. She couldn't stay. She couldn't walk those halls without feeling the cold breath on her neck, without hearing that broken whisper. But sometimes, on late nights when she drives past the old hospital, she can't help but look up at the dark, abandoned East Wing, and almost every time, she swears she can see a faint light, flickering in a single window on the top floor, room 9, and if you were to stand there in the silence, listening closely enough, you might just hear the faint, frantic beeping of a heart monitor that should have stopped beating years ago. Thanks for listening to this story. If you enjoy tales of the strange and unexplained, make sure to follow for more. Stay safe out there.